Well, hi class. So today I want to focus our attention on the critic speech. That's the speech assignment that you're working on this week. Your outlines for the speech are due on Wednesday, and then you'll do your actual recording of the speech that's due at the end of the week. And with the critic speech, this assignment is all about learning how to put an outline together. So you do a good job on your outline for the critic speech, you're halfway there in terms of getting a decent grade on the assignment. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over the outline format again. I covered that in last week's Zoom recording, but just kind of as a refresher, I'm going to go over the outline format, and then we'll take a look at a couple sample outlines that you can use as a guide when you're putting your outline together for the critic speech. But before we do any of that, just by way of review, last week you were learning how to put a speech outline together, and you had the quiz on speech structure. Most of you have that down now. You've got a 10 on the quiz. For those of you that didn't do so well on the quiz, just make sure that you watched last week's Zoom recording. That's the 3-1 Zoom recording. In the last third of that instructional video, I go over how to answer the quiz so that you get a 10, and I actually show you how to take one of the 4 topics, how to construct the outline, and what that finished outline should look like. So you want to make sure that if you didn't do well on the quiz, watch the video and you can retake the quiz. That's fine with me. You can retake all of the quizzes multiple times. And so if you got a grade or a point total that you didn't like, take that thing over, make sure you watch that 3-1 video, and you should be good to go and get a good outcome on the quiz on speech structure. So today I want to focus on the structure for the critic speech. And I covered that in detail as well on that 3-1 Zoom recording, but just as kind of a refresher course, let's go ahead and take a look at the outline format for the critic speech and a couple sample outlines. Let's go ahead and go to the screen. Okay, so here we're on the module for the critic speech. And here, notice too, we've got 4 tabs. So you've got your overview of the critic speech, the outline format, a couple sample outlines right here, and then we have some sample critic speeches that you can watch as well. So lots of guides here to ensure that you're successful on this speech assignment. So let's go to the outline format, all right? And just by way of review, and remember, we learned last week in any speech outline, you're always going to have 3 sections. You're going to have the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And basically what you're doing in any speech is, in the intro, here's what I'm going to talk about. In the body of the speech, we talk about it, and in the conclusion, we summarize what we just spoke about. So we know in the introduction, there are 4 components. We want to make sure that we begin with an attention getter. And in last week's Zoom recording, I went over the 5 kinds of attention getters. And just by way of review, what are they? Well, we've got a brief story or anecdote. That's a great way to begin a speech. Hypothetical examples, that's kind of a made-up story, usually begins with the word imagine. Rhetorical questions, those are a series of questions that we pose to the audience, but we're not anticipating for the audience to respond back. That's why the rhetorical questions. You can also begin with a quotation. So if you're doing your speech on a movie, you could use a line from the film. That could be a great way to begin your presentation. And also a statistic can work well as an attention getter. Once you grab the attention of the audience, now the introduction, and in fact, all of your intros are going to sound pretty similar because you all have the same main points in the body of the speech. And if we just jump down to the body right here, we'll see that our first main point would be a description of the event. And then our second main point will be an evaluation of the event. So if I'm doing my speech on a movie, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the movie, and then I'm going to give my opinion as far as what I liked and didn't like. So back to the introduction, let's say that I'm doing a speech on, I just watched Tom and Jerry the other night. So let's say that's the movie we're doing our speech on. So when I get to the topic after my attention getter, this brings me to the topic of my speech, the movie Tom and Jerry. Then I go to my thesis statement right here. All your thesis statement should be for this speech is a single sentence that gives your overall opinion, right? So, yeah, the movie was okay. I liked it. So my thesis statement would be, this was a movie that I found entertaining and I enjoyed watching the film. Then the last thing I do in my intro, and you're going to do this in any introduction, always in the introduction by previewing or telling the audience the titles of the main points that you'll cover in the body of the speech. And all of your previews should sound something like this. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a description of the film and then my evaluation. Or it could be of a TV show, of a book, a movie, whatever your topic is, your preview will be the same because you all have the same main points. I'm going to give you a description and then my evaluation. And then in the body of the speech, that's what you do. And so the thing to understand here is the difference between the description and the evaluation. In the description, we don't want to use any evaluative terms. Those are terms or words that indicate worth, like good, bad, right, wrong, liked, didn't like, delicious, tasted terrible, right? Those are all opinions that indicate some kind of worth. So we just want to make sure we're not using any evaluative terms in the description. So nothing about, oh, I really liked this. I thought the acting was great. The plot didn't make sense towards the end of the movie. Those are all evaluative comments, right? You're giving an opinion about something you liked and didn't like. So in the description, you're just describing without an opinion. And so if you're doing your speech on a movie, you might tell us the genre of the movie. You might mention the actors that played the characters in the film. You can tell us a little bit about the movie, but no more than 3 or 4 lines on what the movie, the show, or the book is about, because you don't want to give away too much. You don't want to spoil the TV show, the book, or the movie for the audience in case you give it a favorable review and the audience, oh, I'm going to check that out. I mean, for me, I wouldn't have watched shows like Breaking Bad, The Walking Dead, and a lot of other shows unless I heard a student talk about them in class. So in the description, if you're talking about the overall storyline or plot, just enough to kind of whet our appetite, but no spoilers. Don't ruin the entertainment for people who haven't had a chance to go ahead and view that entertainment. Once I'm done with my description, and this is a 3 to 5 minute speech, so I would say don't worry about the number of subpoints. Think more about the time. You want about a minute of content in the description and a minute of content in the evaluation to at least get to that 3-minute mark in a 3 to 5 minute speech. Once I get all of my descriptive comments in, before I go to my next point, the evaluation, I've got to make sure that I end that first main point with a transition. And all a transition does is it tells us the title of the main point you're leaving and the title of the main point you're going into. So something like, now that you have a better understanding of the film, let's next focus on my evaluation. And that's so simple, but it's so important to public speaking, because if you don't give us a transition, the audience won't know, right? They only know what you tell them. So if you just go from your last line in the description to the first line in the evaluation, the audience will think you're still in the description. That's why transitions are so vital, so crucial, so integral. When it comes to public speaking, you've got to make sure that you get those nice, clear transitions in. That's why when you initially are constructing your speech, and we learned last week, once we know our topic and once we have our thesis, our overall opinion, I like this or I didn't like it, then you do the body of the outline first, then go back and do the introduction and the conclusion. So once I get all of my content into the description, when I'm writing my transition, I'm just going to look at the headings. And so always put the titles of the main points in the outline. Don't put main point 1 here, main point 2 here, because that makes it harder to write the transition. When I write the transition, I'm looking up at the title of my first main point and the title of my next main point, so I can include those 2 titles in my transition. Now that I've given you a description, let's next focus on my evaluation. Make sure you get those transitions in. They're vital. Now I go to my evaluation. In my evaluation, that's where I indicate evaluative terms. Stuff that I like, stuff that I didn't like, and why. And sometimes you'll find when you initially put the outline together, the speech will be a little top heavy in the body of the speech because it's just easier to describe, right? Easier to describe than to evaluate. So a good way to kind of stretch the evaluation is just make sure you give a reason for every evaluative claim. So let's say that you tell me, oh, I really like the movie. If you just add, I call this the because clause, if you just add because to the end of that sentence, I really like the movie because, it forces you to give a reason, some kind of support. It's what we call in argumentation and debate, a warrant to support your claim. So if you're a little short on the evaluation, make sure that you're using examples to be able to support whatever you liked or didn't like in the evaluation. That should help you to stretch the content. Now, in my conclusion, and again, it's a good idea to write the intro and the conclusion together, because other than the attention getter, right, which we have right here in the beginning of the speech, other than the attention getter, your conclusion is going to be pretty much the same, right? You're going to begin by summarizing your 2 main points. So instead of in the preview where you're telling us what you're going to do, in the next few minutes, I'm going to give a description and an evaluation. In the conclusion, now you're telling us what you've just done. In the last few minutes, I've given you both a description and my evaluation. The next thing you do is restate your thesis. Hopefully now you have a better understanding as to why I like this film so much. And then, great way to end a speech is end your speech by referring back to the opening attention getter. So if you began with rhetorical questions, then you can answer the rhetorical questions at the end of the speech. If you began with the story, refer back to the story at the end. If you began with the hypothetical example, refer back to the hypothetical example at the end. And that really kind of lets the audience know, okay, we're getting to the end of the speech, because we're used to that. We see that in a lot of films, right? You're almost 2 hours in, and then you see a scene that you saw at the very start of the movie, and so you know usually, okay, we're getting to the end of the film. It's what we call the sandwich technique in public speaking. So in terms of your outline for the critic speech, here is the outline format to follow. And essentially, you want your outline to look just like this, as we'll see as we now go up to the next tab, click on the sample outline, and here we have not 1, but 2 sample outlines for the critic speech. This first one, this is old. This was done on the movie Saw, but it's an excellent example of what the finished product should look like. So if you want to do well on this assignment, and remember, a big chunk of your grade will be on how well you put your outline together. Once you have your outline finished, compare it to the sample outline. It should look just like this, right? Notice how I'm following the rule. 1 sentence per subpoint. That's so important when you're putting an outline together, because again, if I'm going to use the outline to learn the speech, and if I'm going to use the outline to deliver the speech, I want to be able to easily look at my outline and find the next line. If I had this attention getter just in a paragraph, and then I forget the second half of the second question, it's going to be harder for me to glance at my outline and see that phrase, look up and deliver the phrase. So you want to make sure that you spread everything out. Anytime you're putting an outline together, follow the rule, 1 sentence per subpoint. That will ensure that your spacing is correct. And so here you have an example of an attention getter. Here the speaker is using 3 rhetorical questions. And the reason why we use a series of rhetorical questions, if we're going to use that as an attention getter, if I just began with 1 rhetorical question, and if I'm speaking in front of a live audience, the audience may think it's an actual question, and so folks are throwing their hands up to answer the question. You don't want that. In fact, you never want to begin a speech with an actual question. You're giving up too much control at the outset of the presentation. So the trick with rhetorical questions is to ask the first question and then immediately go into that second question, and then a third question just to be on the safe side. So after you ask that first question, even if you see a hand shoot up, you go right into the second one, then you see must be one of those rhetorical questions, and then the hands slowly go down. After you have your attention getter, you've got the attention of the audience, and in fact, write this down. When you begin your speech, the first words I want to hear out of your mouths should be the attention getter. Don't begin a speech with any kind of meta communication. That's meaningless communication. Well, hi, how's everybody doing? Okay, so I'm going to do my speech on this topic. My name's Joe. Okay, let's get started. No, right? You just bored us at the outset. When you record your speech, what I want you to do, and this is what I call speaking like a pro, it's doing the little things to really get the attention of the audience. Once you hit record, you look right into that camera. That's your audience. And maybe hold that gaze for a second and then go right into your attention getter. No, hi, how y'all doing? I'm so nervous right now. Oh, I have a cold. I'm really sick. I may not be able to get. No, none of that. First words out of your mouths, first words of the attention getter. That's why we call it an attention getter. You're using that to gain the attention of the audience. Now you go into your topic sentence, your thesis statement, and your preview. And all of your topic, thesis statements, and previews will sound pretty similar other than the actual title. Like you could give me a name of a film and I could give you the topic, the thesis, and the preview of the main points. All right, let's say I'm doing my speech on One Night in Miami. Okay, after I come up with my attention getter, this brings me to the film One Night in Miami. This is a movie I really enjoyed, and then in the next few minutes, I'm going to give you both my description of the film and my overall evaluation. Bam, there it is. All of your intros are going to sound similar to that, especially when you get to the topic sentence, the thesis statement, and the preview. Look, if you want to make this real easy when you're putting your outline together, take this sample outline, copy it, put it on a document, then go through and just take out the information in the speech and put yours in. That will ensure that your outline is formatted, organized, and structured correctly. And I don't mind that because I'm trying to develop a habit. So once you do it over and over again, you're going to know the outline format, the structure for any speech like the back of your hand. So repetition, key to retention. I certainly don't mind if you want to use this as a template and then put your content in for your specific topic. All right. Then here we see in the body of the speech, we have a brief description of the movie Saw without giving too much away. And then we get to the transition. With this understanding of what Saw was about, I'd like to now focus on my evaluation of this movie. Notice that we hear the titles of the 2 main points in the transition. And also notice that I don't have to use the exact word description as long as I'm indicating something that's close to that. With this understanding of what Saw was about, same thing as the description. So you can use language to kind of play with the transitions, make them sound a little bit better, but you want to make sure that the audience has a clear understanding that you're done with the first point and you're going into your next point by telling us the title of that point. Here in the evaluation, we have evaluative comments, what the speaker liked and didn't like. And then notice too, when we get to the end of the second main point or the last main point, you do not need a transition. So you never need a transition at the end of the last main point in the speech, because if you look at the conclusion, you begin with the summary of your 2 main points. So it would be redundant if you had a transition and then you got, I have given you a brief description of Saw as well as my evaluation of the movie. So in the conclusion, summarize my two main points, restate my thesis, and then end my speech. And I want to end my speech in a way that it has a sense of impact, but even more importantly, I want to make sure that it has a sense of finality so the audience knows the speech is done, that you are finished speaking. If you're in the classroom and if you don't deliver your speech with a strong sense of finality, the audience doesn't know the speech is over. And so there's kind of this awkward, you're standing there, okay, my speech is done. The audience is thinking, is the speech done or not? Should we clap? We're not quite sure. So real important that that last line has a strong sense of finality, and most of that is just done by using your voice correctly. So you want to go a little slower and lower on the last phrase. So here as an example, so go out with your family or friends to see the movie. Stop with excuses and don't take life for granted, because you never know. You might just become the jigsaw's next victim. Notice I just kind of dropped my vocal tone on the last couple syllables there. And so that creates kind of a nice sense of finality. So that last line is important. And again, a great way to come up with an ending to a speech is to refer back to your attention getter. That kind of gives a big hint to the audience that the speech is coming to a conclusion as well. So here, this is an example of what your critic speech outline should look like. So when you're done putting your outline together, compare it to the sample outline. If your outline looks just like this one, you're going to do real well on this presentation. And then you've got a second sample outline as well. This is on Beyonce's album Lemonade. And you can do your speech on an album or CD. That works as well. And so you have a second sample outline that you can use to guide you as you put your speech together. And then if we go back to the top, and then let's go back to the outline format. If we scroll down to the end, you also have an excellent example here of a critic speech. In fact, let's see how she begins.
What is your perfect love story? Nicholas Sparks has written 15 #1 New York Times best-selling romance novels. A handful of these award-winning books
This will be the attention getter.
Popular movies, including The Notebook, The Lost Song, and Dear John. My favorite screenplay of his is The Longest Ride. I love this movie.
That was the topic sentence.
Dual love story plot,
Thesis.
unexpected friendships.
Here comes the preview.
Interesting storyline and draw the audience in. Today, I will describe the plot of The Longest Ride and provide my personal evaluation of the movie.
Bam.
The Longest.
So there you go. You even have a sample critic speech that you can watch. And when we get to the delivery of the speech, what I'm really after in this presentation, and most of you are getting there with the assignments that we've done, I want you to get the eye contact down. So that means when you're delivering the speech, your eyes should be on the camera. That's your audience. And to get a complete, you have to have at least 50% eye contact. So that means at least half the time, your eyes are on the audience, your eyes are on the camera. And then if you're going to use notes for the speech, that's fine. And kind of, I think, two places that you can put your notes. Either right in front of you, because then it's okay if you glance down, then you glance back up. I like that better than putting them to the side. That looks a little awkward. But the real trick is if you can put your outline, kind of configure some kind of stand, and then you just have your outline right above the camera. And I can't show you on my laptop, but essentially I have a little pouch right on the top. And then see, I've got my note card here with the info that I want to cover. And I have it so it's sitting right over the camera. Same concept as using a teleprompter. And so if you can kind of work out a little stand where you have your outline right there on the top, right? Now I just glance up and then glance back down. It's less noticeable. And kind of a cool feature when you're doing your speech and you're recording it, the further back you go, the harder it is for the audience to be able to tell if you're looking at the outline or if you're looking into the camera. And so if you want to make it a little easier with the eye contact, just scoot back a little further still make sure that you're centered in the frame. But now I can pretty much look right at my outline and it's going to look like I'm looking into the camera. And again, I don't mind if you're using the notes. I just want you to create the appearance of looking at the audience, looking into that camera at least 50% of the time. Also, too, let's really keep working on using vocal variety. So we're having lots of changes in our rate and volume, using pauses to set up lines, to add emphasis to the overall presentation. All of those are great delivery qualities. But essentially on this speech, to get the complete, do your outline perfectly so it looks just like the sample outlines, and make sure when you deliver the speech, you're looking at the camera at least half the time. Do those two things, you're going to do really well on the critic speech. All right? Any questions at all, send me an email, let me know. And then the last thing, in fact, let's go ahead and let's go back to the screen. All right, so the last thing I want to focus on today is how to prepare for the delivery of your critic speech. And you'll notice that your outlines are due on Wednesday, and then the speech is due at the end of the week. When we get to the next two speeches, the informative and the persuasive speeches, you'll have a week between getting your outline turned in and the actual presentation. And the reason why I do that is I'm really trying to teach you one of the most important fundamentals when it comes to public speaking. Always have your speeches written, have your outline prepared in advance of the due date. So you don't want to get into the habit. You won't be a very good public speaker if you're writing your speeches the night before or the day of the presentation. Because the key to being an effective public speaker is to practice. I mean, if you look at public speaking, it's a performance, right? And if you think of other kinds of performances, like let's say that you're performing in a play, right? Well, you don't show up an hour before the play and then the director, all right, here's everybody's lines. Okay, let's get them down. So no, you learn the lines well in advance of the due date, right? If you're in a musical group, you just don't show up for the concert. Hey, what are we playing, right? No, you know the set list and you practice and practice and practice so that you can perform at the highest possible level. I don't know why folks think it's any different when it comes to public speaking, right? Oh, I'll just write my speech the night before and then show. No wonder people are terrified when it comes to public speaking. If you don't put in the practice, you'll be terrified. So the key to being an effective public speaker is to have your speeches written, then practice, practice, practice so you can perform at the highest possible level. So your outlines are due on Wednesday. Then take the next couple days. And with the critic speech, the outline and getting the structure down, that's more important to me than the overall delivery for the critic speech. Once we get to the next two speeches, the informative and the persuasives, we're going to kick up the importance of the delivery even more. You'll be a little bit more experienced. But for this presentation, once you're done with your outline, and this is a good prescription to follow for being successful when it comes to being an effective public speaker, is always practice your speech a minimum of 10 times before the actual performance. And so what I want you to do with public speaking is once your outline is done, right? Okay, I've got my outline submitted. It's done perfectly. The text of my speech is set. Now, just pick up that outline and start reading it out loud. And you just want to do that 10 times before you give the actual presentation. I'm real big on when it comes to public speaking, the way that you want to learn the information is to overlearn it through repetition and not through memorization, right? Memorizing the speech is not a good way to prepare. I advocate repetition is the key to retention. So the more times you just read your speech out loud and say it over and over and over again, well, pretty soon you're going to start learning that information. It's kind of like putting files on your desktop so they're easier to get to. That's what that repetition does. It gets that file, the content, the text of the speech, right at the forefront of your brain, so your recall is much easier. So if you want to do well when it comes to delivering a speech, and especially once you get to the longer speeches, anything over 5 minutes, a great rule to follow is have your speech outline prepared and written 1 week in advance of the due date. Then, in that week leading up to the performance, practice your speech out loud 3 times a day, every day in that week leading up. And every time you go through a repetition, every time you say your speech out loud, work on different things. Like you could say your speech out loud and just focus on how you're going to say each of the lines, right? Really work in the vocal variety. Have an idea where you want to put pauses to create more dramatic effect when you're delivering an overall line. Maybe some lines you want to go a little slower and a little softer. And then other lines you want to pick up the energy a little bit, get a little bit louder and a little bit faster. Good speakers take their audience on a vocal roller coaster. You never let the audience get comfortable with your rate and your volume. If your rate and volume is the same all the way through, that's what we call a monotone, right? Everything in a single tone. And now for my next line, I'm going to focus on, right? And you create what I call a redundant rhythmic pattern, and that lulls the audience to sleep. We want just the opposite. We want lots of vocal variety, lots of changes, lots of shifts in both our rate and our volume. So that's one thing you can practice. Another time you might just get your outline and just practice delivering every line right into the camera. So you're working on that eye contact. Some of you may want to go ahead and step back and stand up and deliver the speech, right? That's cool. We can do that as well. So we could have a stand-up speech. I would want a little bit more room here. I'd probably move this back off my desk, but you can stand up and deliver a speech, or you can go kind of what we're doing now. A lot of you, we're doing the podcast delivery style, but you want to make sure that you're nice and centered in the frame, and then you've got your eyes right on the camera. So practice makes perfect when it comes to public speaking. So you want to get those 10 repetitions in, get your speech down. So now when you're presenting your speech, you're way more familiar with the content than if you just took your outline and you're actually trying to read your outline for the first time and you're doing your delivery. And then you end up spending more time. You don't get it quite right. So you're just recording, re-recording, re-recording, re-recording until you get it down. No, put the practice in before you get to the point that you're going to hit record. Have your delivery down. Now I hit record one time. Bam, it's in the can. I got it in one take, right? That's what prior preparation does. And imagine what the prior preparation does for your confidence level. I promise you, you're going to be way more confident. You're going to be way more positive about the public speaking experience if you put in the practice, right? Then once you do a speech and you do it well, oh, that practice kind of works, right? That pop guy knows what he's talking about. Now that confidence starts to go up even more. And then you realize public speaking is not difficult. All that happens is we just kind of convince ourselves we're going to suck. And the reason we're going to suck is because we don't put in the actual practice. Put in the practice, put in the preparation. Make sure you have your delivery down, and you can still feel a little nervous or anxious and the audience won't know because you practice and you prepared your speech properly. Look, there's no secret to being a successful public speaker. Put in the practice, put in the time, really work on perfecting your craft as a speaker before you hit record. Once you do that, you're going to be a very good public speaker. All right? Don't forget that, kids. And why would we be nervous about speaking in public anyway, right? All that does is silence our voices. Our voice is our power. So don't kind of think, oh, I'm not a very good public speaker. I'm not going to be able to do this very well, because you don't want to take away your most powerful attribute, and that is your voice. All right. Have a good week. Do a good job on the critic speeches. All right. Practice makes perfect. See you later.